AI and blockchain are no longer running on parallel tracks. They are beginning, or maybe have already started to merge, creating a new era of decentralized intelligence. And at the same time, Asia may be positioning itself to lead the charge in AI-first ecosystems, tokenizing real-world assets, and reimagining how traditional finance and decentralized finance, so TradFi and DeFi, can coexist. At ATP, we want to know, what do most companies still misunderstand about the convergence of AI and blockchain technologies? How will tokenization transform real-world assets, and where is the best place to start this process? Can Asia be at the forefront of building these AI-first ecosystems? And even if it is, will the rest of the world actually pay attention? To explore these questions, we are joined by Ganesh Kompella, founding partner at Tyke Ventures, and Chinen Looi, a partner at Saison Capital. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for coming and doing this today. How are you two doing?
Glad to be here. Doing all right, Michael. How about you?
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Michael.
Okay, gents, let's just start with one big question here. What do most people or most companies still misunderstand about the convergence of AI and blockchain? And why do we think this moment feels different from the hype cycles we've seen before? Ganesh, let's start with you.
So, I think most people still treat AI and blockchain as these parallel hype trains. They think it's just buzzword stacking, but the convergence is about pretty much complementary. And why I say that is AI actually brings intelligence, inference, and automation, while blockchain will bring trust, provenance, and coordination. Together, they enable systems that are both smart and trustworthy. And now, coming to the point of why different now compared to where we were 3 or 4 years before, infrastructure has definitely matured. We now see decentralized compute platforms like Speron, Akash Network, Render. We are actually investors in Speron Network. We led their seed round. We have specialized AI chips, and we now also have a robust stablecoin rails, which have come to fruition given the US regulations, recent US regulations. There's also a lot of institutional adoption. JP Morgan's Onyx platform being one of them, it processes billions of tokenized transactions already. BlackRock also launched their 500 million tokenized fund in 2023. And I think in terms of AI adoption, we have OpenAI, Anthropic, Llama open source models. They have put AI in everyone's hand, so it's no longer limited to tech giants. And to just end this note, I would want to say that AI without provenance, which blockchain provides, it's super dangerous. And blockchain without intelligence is pretty much, if I have to use a harsh word, I'll use blockchain without intelligence is useless. But together they kind of make systems smart and trustworthy. So that would be my
I like
thoughts
it.
on
Blockchain
this.
without AI is useless. Chinen, what do you think?
No, I think definitely sort of what Ganesh said makes a lot of sense, right? What is quite apparent about the key unique features about blockchain is that all this data and transactions are readily available. So today, you and I and anyone with a laptop and an internet connection could access blockchain transactions. But the problem is, how do we make sense of it, right? Every day, we're having hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of transactions that are added to not just one blockchain, but we're talking about dozens or hundreds of blockchains out there. Really, how do we make sense of that? And how do we sort of leverage that data to help it to grow? So I think I fully agree with what Ganesh has said. I think another piece that I would add is concepts like blockchain, concepts like AI are not new, right? They have been around for the longest period of time. AI a lot longer than blockchain.
For sure.
But I think what is key that what we're seeing this time around and what's different, it's really who is using it. I think for both technologies, but especially blockchain, which is where we at Saison Capital invest a lot in, it started out by being really for individuals, what we call degens, traders, people looking to have a good time.
Yeah, it was kind of like over here, right? I mean, just somewhere different. I was going to ask you that, but go ahead because I want to get into this in a second. Please go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what has happened over the past 3 years, it's really where we see a lot more financial institutions, a lot more large corporations, and nonetheless, regulators stepping in and stepping up to understand what this technology is And to me, it's really a coming of age moment because finally people are learning to see blockchain past cryptocurrency, which is that, oh, number go up or number go down
Right,
kind of
right, right,
thing, right?
right, right,
But
right.
really understand and appreciate how the technology can be used.
So I want to ask both of you this, right? Because you both have been involved in this longer than most people have. And, I want to ask if the substance has changed, but more importantly, and this is not true for AI, because like Ganesh said this and Chinan, you said this as well. AI has been around since the 1950s. The compute around it has changed. So the ability to use it and democratize it and have more people use it has definitely changed. But blockchain's really only been around for like a decade, really, maybe a little bit more, right? But in the early days, and even up until like 3 or 4 years ago, big institutions like Jamie Dimon just said it was a scam. And now JP Morgan is running Connexus. So what had to change or what did change? And Chinam, let's start with you. Like, was it a technological thing? Was it a mindset thing? Was it a regulatory thing? What had to change or what did change for those guys to get involved and actually legitimize this? Because before, as you said, it was happening off to the side. And the people that were doing it were not part of like the traditional financial system. So what changed?
I think what really changed was that people finally understood the technology and really looked past the hype, right? I think for a long period of time, people were just caught up with the first application of blockchain, which is cryptocurrencies, right? That was how Bitcoin came out, that's how Ethereum came out. And to be fair, I think a lot of noise was generated,
Yeah.
especially in the 2018 to 2021 era, where all you could hear about when you talk about blockchain is how much money people have made,
Right, right,
right?
right, right.
And I think that leaves a kind of a sour taste in people's mouth. It's a bit like none of us really go around telling you or me how much money I have in my bank account.
Don't care.
It's just kind of odd, right? It's
Yeah,
kind
don't
of an
care.
odd dynamic, an odd social
Yeah,
situation
yeah,
to
it'd
be
be
put in.
weird.
Uh, and I think sort of what really changed it's in 2022 when obviously the markets crashed, many of the tourists left, and I think finally people were like, okay, what now, right? Obviously, many of these traders, a lot of these loud voices have went away, and I think that really sort of give that some space for people to think, people to explore, people to understand that technology. And I think fundamentally what that sort of bear market created was a safe space where everyone could ask the simplest of questions, everyone could explore it, and there was no pressure, right? There was no pressure to say, I'm launching a new blockchain project, I'm launching a new NFT project. It was very much an experiment. Let's see whether it works. And as it turns out, it really worked, right? So what we see is the huge influx of stablecoins. Just in 2019, it was $5 billion worth of stablecoins on chain. Today, we have 50x that, right? $250 billion worth of stablecoins on the blockchain. And more importantly, it's a shift, right? Stablecoins first existed for crypto traders to store their value, but today it is used for things like cross-border payments. It's used for things for so many other real financial purposes. So what I would say is really 2022 to 2024 was the defining era where people finally were given the space to experiment, and a lot of the chatter, a lot of the noise had died down.
Almost all these big enterprises kind of have been doing proof of concepts and then they double down, triple down, and invest massive amounts of capital. And they are used to doing this. Like, this would probably be the 100th thing which JP Morgan is experimenting with since their inception. So, if I look at 5 years ago, AI plus blockchain was just a white paper idea. Today, I would say it's kind of becoming, it's not fully, but it's kind of becoming an infrastructure reality. Uh, if you look at 2000, I won't consider 2017 because it was just an ICO boom. No great companies really formed except Ethereum. It was just token pump and dump. So I'll take 2017 out. But from 2018 till 2020, a lot of good companies came up. Mostly white paper pitches though on this particular topic that we are discussing: AI agents on chain, blockchain for AI training, but purely white papers. There was no infra for decentralized compute. GPUs were most probably locked in the Facebook, Google's, Netflixes of the world. Only they had access to big compute GPUs. Crypto was, of course, in a winter post that enterprises were super skeptical. Now, if I look at 2024, and I'm going to skip the NFT phase from 2021 onwards because enterprises really are not, they don't care about collectibles or NFT. So I'll skip those years too. 2024 and 25 is when you see, when you saw actual infrastructure getting built. My fund was also extremely operational during that time. We have deployed our first fund totally. Now, in those years, we see decentralized compute marketplaces actually supply GPUs on demand. We have AI agents on chain. Live experimentation, of course, not real world scale, but people are experimenting. Fetch AI is an example. Autonomous is another example. Suddenly, this year, we all, as Jin was mentioning earlier, we also have a lot of regulatory clarity emerging. EU has something called MICA, which covers crypto assets. So I think the landscape is changing in terms of technology, in terms of proof of concept, in terms of regulatory environment. And since everything is coming together, now I think is the time when enterprises will like just put their foot on the pedal.
Do either of you think, because I think about this a lot, right? Do either of you think that the Jamie Dimon moment when he said, and I'm just using him as a proxy, right, for big institutions, but do either of you think that that moment where he was like, this Bitcoin thing is a scam, fits into two categories? One is, hey, maybe if I can get this thing to go down, we can actually accumulate some of this. And second, almost like the Steve Jobs moment where he was like, nobody wants to watch video on an iPod while they're desperately trying to figure out how they can get video to work on an iPod. Are those things analogous at all? Who wants to take it first?
I mean, I had a really nice thought about this when this happened. So if Steve Jobs would have said it, I consider Steve Jobs as a technologist. He creates loving products. I'm using almost all of his products right now, sitting at my home office. If I look at Jamie, yes, of course, you see. Now, if I look at Jamie Dimon is a banker. He kind of puts money where the opportunity for money is to grow. That is his skill set. I would not, I would not take his considerations and thoughts on frontier technology too seriously. That's what my first reaction was. I just compared him to Steve Jobs because you mentioned Steve Jobs. So there are two different category of individuals. But these were my thoughts when I heard Jamie Dimon say that in that interview for the very first time.
Chinan, what do you think? You were smiling when I said this.
No, I'm smiling because at the end of the day, I think with any new technology, with anything new in general, there's always pushback. And I think for someone like, Jamie Dimon, who banks a significant part of the world, banks governments,
Yep.
Naturally there is pushback, right? Because
Interesting.
essentially what blockchain has done is created an alternative infrastructure, an alternative system where money and capital can access outside. Basically, in short, it's competing against banks, right? Today, you can operate a stablecoin, a large part of it without a bank. Obviously, there's still parts of it, especially the on and off ramps, so you still need existing financial institutions. But quickly, what we're seeing is many of these solutions are coming up to render these institutions irrelevant. So naturally, I don't think this is surprising. And for us, what was particularly interesting at that point was actually what was happening here in Asia. As we all know, in 2023, 2024, the US pursued an extremely aggressive stance against anyone doing things in the blockchain. And naturally, JP Morgan or many of these US institutions, being in the US, you do not want to jeopardize your crown jewel, your cash machine for something that's still experimental, right? So obviously, you align yourself with the regulatory climate, the political climate. And I think what's more interesting is during the early years, what we saw is many Asian institutions were already experimenting. The key difference is they were obviously not coming up with splashy press releases or media announcements because a lot of this was behind the scenes. And for us, as a financial institution ourselves, as a venture capital fund that many of our peers reach out to us to say, hey, what's going out there? We really sort of have this first-hand view to it, which is why we continue to invest when everyone was leaving in the space during 2022 to 2024.
Okay, well, let me just give you my perspective. This show is demonstrably not about me, but the reason why I think about this is because I sat on a trading desk at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs for a decade and a half or more. And I think whenever somebody that big and that powerful and that influential is talking about some kind of position, they're trying to have some kind of impact on the market, but I'll just leave that out there for people to decide for themselves. You both mentioned regulation, right? So I do want to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the Genius Act. What do you guys think the significance is of, and the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, right? Because the Clarity Act in the U.S. is also talking about, what are digital assets, and this gets into the real world asset, into blockchain kind of thing. What do both of you think about these regulations, and what do you think their impact is going to be going forward, at least as a first cut?
I think especially on the Genius Act, I think it has much more to do with how they want to control the circulation of US dollar rather than the crypto and the stablecoin space. Yes, stablecoins is linked to the Genius Act, but the way that they have structured stablecoins and the regulatory stablecoin to come under the Department of Treasury, I think they really want to make sure that anybody using the term USD or USDT or USDC,
Yep.
any derivatives of the US dollar, stay within their regulatory realm. I think the Genius Act is purely for that purpose, and it will have ripple effects on how the stablecoin markets uh, will grow potentially 10x, 20x from this point onwards. I also think that in the very near future, some third world countries where their own currency is not strong enough, maybe they will all start adapting to a particular US dominated stablecoin and just skip away from their own country's currency. You already see that happening in Argentina. A few of my friends went there. You can pay all your vendors through stablecoins. Nobody is using their own currency anymore. So
I want both of you to talk about what you think that means for the dollar itself, right? Because there was this fear in the last couple of months of dollar weakening, but if countries like Argentina are going to take payments in dollars through stablecoins, that can't weaken the dollar per se. Sorry, Tina, go ahead.
No, I think what you said is exactly on point. What people have very quickly realized is that if they don't regulate it and they don't create a safe space, clear guidelines for market players to come in, then capital, talent, everyone is going to go elsewhere, right? So in my mind, the Genius Act is really a way to bring this back onshore, to encourage people to locate, to hire people in the US itself. But I think to us, it's a huge positive catalyst, right? Because the US is still seen as the benchmark for technology, for innovation, for policy. And I think this has actually created a huge cascade across many of the governments and regulators all around the world, such that everyone now is thinking about creating their own stablecoin regulation. So in my mind, this is a massive win. It creates a lot of legitimacy, and the legitimacy will unlock new sources of capital.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Look, you were both talking about Asia before, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this too, if for no other reason than we're in Asia, but also because I feel like I've kind of made a personal bet, a personal professional bet on like Asian ascendance, right? But you actually said earlier, Chin, and that like a lot of companies out here, a lot of banks out here were experimenting, but kind of experimenting in the background. But now that it's possible to do this stuff in the foreground, and again, this is for both of you, pick either one of you can go first. But can Asia actually lead this charge? Right, the U.S. is going to do this stuff on the stablecoin side. I don't think dollar hegemony is going to go away. To be fair, I was a little bit sanguine about where the dollar was going to go, but I've completely changed my mind. I think the dollar is just going to keep strengthening for the reasons that both of you guys mentioned. But from a technology standpoint and from an innovation standpoint, can Asia actually be involved in leading this charge on the AI stuff and on the convergence of AI and blockchain?
I'm happy to take that first, right? Look, I think at the end of the day, what we're going to see, I think the way this is shaping up, it's going to be very similar to fintech. And the simplest analogy I draw, it's 15 years ago when fintech first came out, almost every fintech startup will be saying, F off to the banks, right? Like, we don't want to be a bank. We don't want to be like you. We're going to innovate.
We're going to disrupt
almost
everything.
Every fintech. Exactly. We're gonna tear down the banks, right? Now, 15 years have passed. We have created multiple billion-dollar companies through fintech. No one doubts fintech. We all have all these apps that use in our everyday lives. Look at them, right? Every fintech is becoming closer to a bank, and every bank is becoming closer to a fintech.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Can I just clarify this? When you say every fintech is becoming closer to a bank, do you mean structurally themselves becoming more and more like a bank, or getting closer to the existing banks so that they can then serve them as opposed to building themselves? What do you mean?
Both, I would say, right? So either they are acquiring banking license, trying to be a bank, or they are doing it in very close partnership with the existing. And maybe banks is a specific word, but I would just use broader financial institutions, right?
Okay.
So what we have seen is this convergence of innovation with traditional. And I think the same is going to happen over here. Now, what does this mean? This means that things like regulatory licenses, it creates a natural moat, right? And especially with stablecoins, if you really think about it, if you do a stablecoin well, you start to mess around with a country's monetary supply, right? And because of that, what we have seen consistently actually across this region is regulators are favoring local teams, local talent, and they want to grant licenses to people who understand them. So in that regard, I think that there can be multiple and many successful companies that are born out of Asia, and they are serving their own domestic markets. Let's just take, for example, fintech in China, right? Obviously, very, very successful. Many of these names that are well known globally, but most of them were entirely successful predominantly by serving one market, right? So I think it's going to be the same over here for blockchain for stablecoins, and that's really because this space is getting regulated. Before regulation, it's a bit like it's a free for all, right? It doesn't matter where you are. There's no moat. Anyone can come in and eat your pie. But I think that with regulation, with where everyone is headed towards, there's going to be a strong preference for local.
Okay. So Ganesh, I really want your opinion on this, and I'll tell you why. I was thinking before Chinen started answering, right, about this idea of just how big and powerful the United States is, how big and powerful the tech ecosystem there is, and what the impact on the dollar is that we were talking about, how big that's going to be on the power and the hegemony of the US dollar. And I was thinking, let's put China aside because China itself is a very domestic market in a way. It's very large and very powerful. But I was thinking there's no large country in Asia, but then I thought India, right, which has unbelievable payment rails, a government that's really forward-looking, a national ID that's blockchain-based, and a massive set of institutions, the IITs, that are really technology-focused. That is this one of the places in Asia that can actually start to dominate in these spaces? Because even if, as Chinen says, it's completely local, local in India is 1.4 billion people, whereas local even in Thailand is 70 million people. So what do you think?
So we have been very strategically giving this a lot of thought. This question and the conversation we are having, we kind of combined blockchain and AI. And but for I think in my opinion, it should be separate for blockchain and AI. I totally agree with what Kin said. If I was just talking about blockchain, crypto, stable coins, and so forth, and the technologies involved. But when I look at AI, I think I have a different approach and a different mindset towards this entire region. So Asia will lead applied AI blockchain use cases, application use cases, but the deepest infra, in my opinion, may still come out of Silicon Valley. And I have two main reasons for saying this. So it is not just the end user market and your skill set to building AI. You need access to the world's best GPUs, semiconductors, which a lot of countries in Asia currently do not have. They all are sending purchase orders to Nvidia. They are getting filled, but there's a queue for it. You can't. They are not multiple sources. And if suddenly US has a geopolitical fit, they'll just close that tab and you're done. And the second reason is, I would say, energy. If you end up building towers and towers of data centers, you need excessive and huge amounts of energy. Right now, I think India has some excess energy, which we are selling to Bangladesh and some other neighboring countries, but we don't have excess amount of energy compared to China or to Russia. We are net energy importers. And if I want to build AI infrastructure, I need GPUs and energy. So for those two very strong and outside of an engineer's mind, like as an engineer, I can code and I can do millions of things, but these are outside of my realm. And I need those things to build AI infrastructure. And which is why I think they might still be happening in Silicon Valley.
So Chinan, how does the rest of Asia deal with this, right? Because India, as a large country, is still an energy importer. How do you think about this idea of building all these data centers, but also then managing the energy side of it as well? It's an interesting way to think about this, yeah?
I think definitely so. But I think the truth of it also is many of these other countries outside are a lot smaller, right? So for a lot of them, I think a lot of the concerns are really first, how do I protect my own energy interests before they think about exporting? I think with all of these issues out there, what is very clear is that India itself has the talent, has the capacity, has the ambition to solve these problems by themselves, right? It by itself has been a huge miracle, a huge success story. So I suspect that a lot of these solutions would come more from internally rather than from externally.
Just to add on that, countries in Asia and also some countries from Middle East, uh, they are also collaborating at many different levels, not just technology levels. India has like very interactive partnerships with UAE, Saudi countries who are energy exporters. So in a very futuristic world, India can build its data centers on their sovereign land and they can be providing all the energy. These kind of talks have already happened, but we have not seen anything come to fruition. But if those things come to fruition, then you automatically solve the energy problem. But then the semiconductor problem still exists. So I think it will take much more longer than people are anticipating, and people will very similar to how when Shin was mentioning about fintechs. Fintechs were built on AWS's Google Clouds and all those infrastructures. Those fintechs won't exist if those AWSs were not coming out of Silicon Valley. I think we are in a similar kind of a situation when I talk about AI and Asia. We will have all the compute and all the models coming out of Silicon Valley, and we'll use those models and build beautiful end user applications. But the core foundational models will still be coming from that part of the world. I mean, that I don't want to sound too negative on this, so I also want to touch on some strengths. So if I look at Asia, we have talent and scale, as we were talking about. India alone, like graduates close to 2 million engineers annually.
Yeah,
That's huge.
it's gigantic.
China, Singapore, I know are investing billions and billions of dollars into AI R&D. Uh, the government push is also there. India has a national AI mission. Singapore has an AI verify framework. UAE has its own ministry of AI now. We definitely have cost advantages. Experimentation is much cheaper in Asia. More startups can try, fail, and iterate, which is not the case with Silicon Valley. So some strengths are there, but definitely some challenges too.
Can I ask you both, just from a banking perspective, right? I've watched all these transformations of the banking system, right? And we can look at a company like Wise, TransferWise, right? Which essentially said, I'm going to open up a bank account in every country that I possibly can. I'm going to have deposits, right? So they have their own money in every account. And when I pick a currency, USD, and transfer it to Japan, I'm not actually moving money outside of America into Japan. I'm just moving money from one kind of ledger in the US to another ledger in the US, and the same thing in Japan. So the FX trade actually never happens unless it's a massive amount of money. But if it's massive, it's not going to happen with TransferWise. What happens though when, as you guys were mentioning, these fintechs become more and more like banks? They start to begin to use agentic AI combined with what's going on in the stablecoin space and blockchain. How do all these things fit together so that like this kind of money payment automation changes just the way the base economy works? What do you guys think about that?
There are already a few companies who are trying to tackle this in a very innovative way and without using AI. I don't want to name names because we have recently invested and we have not announced the
That's
round
okay.
yet.
Just the
So
concept,
I'm
though.
not going to do any name calling. But this company is from Singapore and they are doing everything that you just described, just without the AI transactions element out of it. Uh, they are just doing ledger entries in the receipt country and the initiation country. No transfer is actually happening, and there are parties at both sides servicing in different currencies. So I'm sending you, let's say, I want to send you 1,000 Singapore dollar, and I'm sending it from India. This India company is going to give me a bill in INR. I will clear that bill, and the counterparty in Singapore is going to give you the Singapore dollars pretty much instantaneously. No wait times, nothing at all. So those kind of things have come to fruition after the recent stablecoin rails improvements.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think that's the beauty of sort of this innovation cycles, right? As we mentioned, fintechs becoming like banks, and then at the end of the day, does it fully solve the problems that they set out to do? The answer is no, right? But then, but then we have also been able to achieve scale, and overall, from a very simplistic perspective, have the benefits outweigh the costs? Are we better off? The answer is yes, right? So I really see blockchain to be similar. Will we be able to solve all the problems that we set out to do that Satoshi Nakamoto established in there? The answer is probably not. But will we be better off? I think the answer is definitely yes. Then the question is, what then would be the next cycle? What then would be the next technology? it's you and my best guess, but I think that's the beauty of it also, that every generation, every decade, every cycle, there is always still problems to be solved, and that creates new opportunities for founders. I think it'll be kind of sad if, let's say, today, hypothetically, blockchain says, whoops, done, we have solved all the problems with financial services, thank you very much everyone, everything is perfect. You and I know that that's not going to happen, but that's also really the opportunity and why people like me and Ganesh have a job, right? Which is we invest in the startups that are going to solve these new problems. And the startups we invest in 5, 10 years from now will look very different, but at least there's still imperfections that need to be solved.
So this is the next question. It's a perfect segue, actually. How should companies approach innovation in this space, whether it's just in this sort of AI space, not if it's not just in the AI space, but in the how are these things going to combine and merge? And to be fair, one of the conversations that I was having a few days ago with somebody, we basically made this determination that there's going to be no such thing as DeFi and TradFi. It's just going to be Fi, right? Because like every time a new technology comes along that tries to disrupt, and we talked about this earlier, whatever the existing thing is, it kind of gets subsumed by it. It may change this thing over here, but it never becomes non-traditional finance. It just becomes finance, but maybe like in a different shape or with a different taste. But what should companies be looking at and how should they be innovating? And you guys are, like you said, you're both investors. What are you guys looking for?
Let me give you my funds approach. Maybe we'll start there and see how the thought process takes from there. My first one was completely focused on blockchain infrastructure companies. So AI was not part of that fund's thesis, and almost we have fully deployed that fund. The second fund is focused on AI companies, blockchain companies, and companies who are operating at the convergence. With this theme, we have also added one more caveat to this. We only want to back AI first founders. And what I mean by AI first, uh, founders who are using AI in their daily doings, not doing anything without interacting with AI in one way, form, or the other. In my personal experience, I've felt that it just increases your productivity by many folds.
Sure.
Secondly, using AI to write some percentage of their code, using decentralized infra for scalability, defensibility. So it's just a different kind of a mindset. Instead of like you trying to 3 or 4 founders locked in a conference room trying to brainstorm, hey, how this can be done. Uh, you bring AI into the mix. The AI is your first engineer. The AI is your first marketing guy. The AI is your first salesperson. So if that kind of a AI first mindset you have, and if you're building an AI blockchain or convergence of AI and blockchain, is I would say a perfect combination for founders for the next few years. I think they are going to be massively successful and very quick into determining markets and also pivoting away from markets compared to how older startups used to work. So I think from a founder's perspective, if that is your approach, then I think you're just going to have a very fun time doing all this and also mint a lot of money in the process.
I want to ask both of you this though, and Chanel, I'll get to you in a second if you want to follow up with that. I just said a few minutes ago that I think this idea of the separation between decentralized finance and traditional finance is going to go away. It's just going to be finance. And I would go back 15 or 20 years and say, like for retail, you had online retail and offline retail, but now there's just retail. And in the even older days, you would say like it's an internet company and the internet company is going to have an advantage. Can we make the case that AI first is like a short-term thing, maybe like a 3-year thing going forward, and that almost by definition, it's going to have the same kind of intonation as internet first, decentralized finance, that it's just going to be part of the core competencies of all companies, or they're just going to go away? Is that fair?
So I think it's all going to go away. Let's take a very clear example, right? Today in the blockchain world, we spend so much time discussing what blockchain are you on?
Right,
Are you on
right.
mainnet? Are you on Solana? Are you on the latest Barra chain? At the end of the day, most of the people don't care.
And
right?
don't
They
know,
just want
maybe.
it to work.
They may not even know, right? But go ahead.
Correct. And I think the beauty of it is that's really the vision of where blockchain is headed towards, where we can all benefit from it without exactly knowing how it works, without having to set up a seed phrase, without having to set up a wallet. I think we're getting there. It's very evident that the solutions that are emerging from startups mostly are built towards catering that. So I think it's a matter of time, and we are a lot closer to there than where we were before.
I probably think people who adopt AI first as quickly as possible are going to be extremely successful, and it will just be a regular norm for everybody to operate in. It's just like if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, you can do more things, you can be more productive. You don't need to go. So for example, let's say suddenly I have an investment opportunity into life sciences. Earlier, as a fund, uh, if I want to focus on life sciences, I was required to have, not usually, I was required to have a PhD level guy in life sciences as an advisor on my board to whom I would go to get the details and have deep dive sessions and everything. I no longer need that. So suddenly, your capabilities, your capacity to handle work, the amount of work you can handle, the amount of world class work you can deliver, it has already gone out of the roof. So AI first is, I think, the approach for the next 5 years. People who are going to use this term a lot, and post 5 years, I think this is how you would operate. Like there would not be any debates.
Yeah, you and I agree on this. I said 3 years, you can say 5 years, but I just do think at some point it's just going to go away. And to be fair, I use AI every day in my business. There's no way I could be as nearly as efficient nor as effective as I am without it. And I think that's true for everybody on the screen right now. Okay, guys, what is a controversial idea at the intersection of all these things we've been talking about that you still think is worth pursuing, but it's kind of controversial?
I would probably start with federated AI. What I mean by federated AI is there is so we see a lot of countries already debating where their data needs to be stored. In the age of the internet, nobody really cared. People were using data centers left, right, and center anywhere available. But suddenly they want to only store, for example, healthcare data in EU data centers if
Yeah,
the citizen is an EU citizen.
in their own countries or in their
And
own regions. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So if you end up doing all that and you create these data silos, then you would, and if you want to create a, let's say, AGI top foundational level kind of a world model, then you would need federated AI, where small bits and parts of the models go to these data silos, train themselves, and in a very, very encrypted way, feed in the learnings to the model. So this concept has existed for a very long time. It is super controversial at the same time and very, very difficult to execute. Uh, I think more people need to start looking into it because that is how you are going to unlock the next level of foundational models.
Yeah, I mean, it's super complex, right? Just to be able to manage that.
It's highly complex.
Yeah, very complex.
There is an encryption called FHEE. That encryption methodology has been in existence for a very, very long time. It's just super slow. So if you want to run things through FHE, you would need like to run a 10 MB file, I think you would need 15 minutes or something like that.
Right, which is too
So
long.
a lot of improvements need to be made. Uh, but if that happens, then suddenly the world data can be plugged into a model without the need of any of the geopolitical concerns that we currently have.
Yeah. Tinem, what do you think? What's a controversial idea that we should be really consider?
So mine is a lot simpler. National blockchains. So I think when you say that, many people will like shrivel because the whole point of blockchain is decentralization,
Right.
autonomy. You don't trust in a single party. You don't trust the state, right? But I think what is critical is that today the vast majority of capital is controlled by institutions, right? It's not really by individuals.
Yeah.
Now, in order for those institutions to be comfortable with deploying their capital on the blockchain, it needs to be controlled, right? I think that's what scares people from putting their capital on like Ethereum or Solana. That everyone can see it, it's subject to hacks, and once it's lost forever. So I think it's going to be a stepping stone where we need national blockchains that are created by the regulators, and we're already starting to see some of that, for example, in Singapore and in Brazil, that gives institutions the comfort of putting their capital there, right? People like all of us on this call probably already hold crypto and we don't need to be sold. But people like my parents, for example, right, it would scare the idea out of them, that this idea of self-custody. So I think there needs to be certain level of assurances, and then it's a stepwise progression. And this national blockchain could perhaps already give people a sense of what the benefits are like. And hey, if you choose that you want to bring this out to a permissionless blockchain, to the stuff out there, that's your prerogative. But I think for the majority of people, what we often forget is that they're actually quite risk averse. And the people that we surround ourselves with are actually quite risk on, right? We love to try out these new technologies. So I think that's one relatively controversial idea, that people would say, oh, you're not Web3 native, or it's going against the blockchain ethos. However, I think it's a necessary step for.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily want to make a comment on whether there should be national blockchains or not, but like this idea of it doesn't fit within the ethos of Web3. I mean, ethos has changed over time, right? It's not like a one fixed thing and then it has to stay there. True. Before I let both of you guys go, because we've been at this for a while now, just pick a risk. What are some of the risks that we haven't spoken about today that we should actually talk about? And Ganesh, let's start with you and we'll finish with you, Chinan.
Few moments ago, you were talking about DeFi and TradFi. And just from a controversy and a risk perspective, this entire industry, when DeFi came about, we started talking about and advocating that, hey, DeFi would replace banks, which might be a contributing factor as to how US was reacting towards this industry the last couple of years. And why I consider this risk is because when I look at DeFi is becoming a middleware. The principles and the proof of concepts that we are displaying using decentralized technology, transparency, composability, programmability, I think this is a technology where traditional finance is going to adopt and build their own rails on top of it. Aave is not going to replace JP Morgan. Aave is probably going to power a few functions inside JP Morgan. But when we started, including me, like when we started with the Web3 decentralized ethos, everybody was too pro decentralization. Nobody really, even now, I don't see a lot of people talk about this. Is why I decided, okay, when you are asking this, let's pick this topic. Yes, decentralization, we are proving something, but this is not here to replace existing platforms. This is here to enhance existing platforms. Show them that, hey, your wire transfer is taking you 1.5 days, bro. It can be done faster. This is how you do it. And it's easier for them. It's less costlier for them. They will see business value in it and they will adapt. And I think that kind of a tone of DeFi being the middleware for traditional finance, if we don't take it seriously ourselves, then those big institutions are never going to take this technology seriously themselves. So that, I would say, is the biggest risk.
I would say the biggest risk that we have is we continue to chase for the hype and just good stories and good PR of bringing assets on the blockchain, but it just stops there, right? I think everyone is always very excited at the start of what it can be, what it could be, but a lot of this innovation has to be driven from the top. A lot of this, and this is not just for large companies or financial institutions, it includes for regulators also. So I would say the devil is really in the details. It really comes down to who is able to execute it better and faster than everyone else. I think today the story of why blockchain has already been answered. The answer towards why blockchain has already been out there clearly. Now the question is, how do we get there and who can do it first? So I think the biggest risk is we just continue to stay at the why blockchain is great. We keep proselytizing on how the benefits are at, but we never really get to show the real results. And I hope within the next 2 to 3 years, this will be a risk that goes away.
Okay. Ganesh Kompella, founding partner at Tyke Ventures, and Chinan Looi, partner at Saison Capital. You guys were both awesome. I think we could have gone on for another hour, but I want to let you guys get back to your regular lives. Thank you both so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
for having us.